Southern Mexican, white, black, and other. And basically, since I was a Chicano, basically, I considered myself Southern Mexican.
Would they give you a choice of Northern Mexican?
I can't I can't recall that, but I'm sure it probably was there.
Well, so my question is how did you navigate this, knowing that you were not really affiliated with that population on the outside? You were not in a gang. You were not a hardcore gang member. You were not a part of the border nationalist gangs. So how did you navigate your identity?
Basically, by kind of heeding some advice of some guys that I got when I was from conversations I had when I was in county jail about who people had been to straight prison before, and basically saying just be yourself. And then when I got into the environment, interacting with my cellmate, who was a Southsider, and he had done some time before, and pretty much we would talk, and he kind of like was never like a outright, well, you're not from any neighborhood, so you're not one of us. It was more like, as long as you're identifying with that, then it's fine, it's okay.
Okay, now you told me earlier that you helped the other inmates with their work, with anything that they needed, dealing with education.
Yeah, a lot of guys, they can't. Their writing skills or their just spelling was usually they knew that they couldn't spell or they had problems with it. So a lot of times I'm just there, and I was like, they would ask me, and I would say, sure, here. So they have like in CDC's environment, they have these 602 forms or these appeal forms that an inmate can write. So a lot of times, I would basically help them write it, or if they're writing it, help them, put this word instead of this word, and then they would write it out and then submit it off to it.
So do you think that helped protect you in prison?
Yes, yeah, it became, because it was that's what I was kind of getting known for. Oh, he's got the smarts, he's able to contribute.
Right. So in some ways, the fact that you were able to contribute in this way kind of protected you from, let's say, any violence or any kind of assaults. Yeah. Okay, so then tell me, so you stayed in for 3 years. Okay, so now you get out. What happens when you come out? What's your mindset like? And when do you start to change? Do you change in prison, or do you change when you get out of prison?
It's always been something I've always looked back on. And when did the change happen? When it was, coming back to those initial experiences in high school, and those before the age of 21 issues. It became like those became the issues that intersected with the criminal justice system. So when I got out this time in '93. It was like I always knew who I was, but now I had these compounded, I was on parole, I was an ex-felon, and I was a high school dropout. And so I always saw myself like from the outside looking in, but I wanted to achieve these different goals. So I would make an effort to achieve these goals, and I was aligned with the job when I got out. I started a community college again, and it basically came to a crossroads again in '95, and that's where I ended up ultimately incarcerated a second time.
Okay, so now tell me about the second term, the second stint. Now, what did you go in for the second time?
The second term I was again involved in alcohol, and I was convicted of second-degree commercial burglary, I believe it's called. Okay. If I can remember correctly.
Okay, and then where did you go?
I went to Wasco Reception, and I went to Susanville.
Okay.
And then I was trained. I went through fire camp training, and I ended up going to fire camp, and then from fire camp I went to work furlough in Long Beach.
Okay, at any time during this period did you seek to get substance abuse help? I mean, obviously you're having a problem with alcohol, so mm-hmm. Did you ever go to any type of Alcoholic Anonymous group meetings?
When I was in Tehachapi, that was my first term, yes, and then in the second term, no. And basically I was just navigating it on my own at the time.
Right. Okay. Now, how long did you spend the second term?
The second term, it was about 16 months.
16 months. Okay. Now, when do you really start to transition into becoming the person that you are today?
That happened on my third violation when I ended up in Chino Central. And I was...
See, that's not a place you really want to be. I've been to observe Chino Central.
Yeah, I was, you know, I was out less than, it maybe had been a little bit more than 90 days. But again, the acting out and the combination with the alcohol really just, you know, basically was, I had my parents very concerned, had my father concerned, and basically what had occurred from there is that they informed my parole agent, and my parole agent came to my parents' house and arrested me and took me into custody and took me to county jail, and then from there I ended up at Central. So it's kind of like a matter of 2 weeks, here I am in Chino Central going through the reception process there, and part of that reception process they have you talk to a clinical psychologist. So it was right there with her I basically asked for help from within the corrections environment, which I knew was like I didn't want to do because of the way their classification process is. So I knew I would have to go into like a new classification system, and I didn't really want to do that. But I really just told myself, you know, it was, here I was again, so I might as well just do it.
Okay, so did you get help in the?
Yes, yeah, I was fortunate, I think, because what occurred is that I was transferred over to the men's 1 yard, and basically that psychologist was actually, that's where her base was, on the 1 yard. So through other circumstances, after the third term, you're considered, you know, in prison lingo, I guess they call it a regular. So, and here is like, wait, but I only had 3 times, and 3 times is enough. And so,
but this is before the 3 strikes law, right?
No, this was actually this was after. This was in '97.
Okay, so do you have a strike?
I believe I have 1.
Okay, okay. So we've talked about the dark side. Now I want to talk about the brighter side. Now, when did you start to transition? You asked for help, you received help, you came out, and when did you enroll in Loyola Marymount? You told me the story about the person at Harvard who was admitted to Harvard. They found out the person had committed murder. The president said, no, we can't, we have to deny your application. But the president at Loyola Marymount, to your amazement, your surprise, said, look, we would have to really contemplate this, and we would just not deny this person automatically. So tell me about the impact that this had on you.
When I was in Chino, a lot of the discussions would go with the psychologist, but then also with the Catholic chaplain there, who was actually completing his PhD in clinical psychology. So I would go speak to him, and I began questioning my own faith in Catholicism, and I carried that out into parole. And what I did was, it's funny because I look back on it, and I went from reading Buckley in the National Review to being introduced to Jesuit spirituality and connecting with the Loyola Institute of Spirituality in Orange, and then receiving some literature, and then I read the literature, and that was kind of set the process to engaging in academic discussions with my community college counselor. And then on his suggestion,